It's the last part of the conference, and it's really exciting to be able to invite a group of distinguished guests and also have the opportunity, to speak about the work of a pioneer in environmentalist causes, the work of Gustav Metzger. In the summer, this summer, as part of our exhibition program, we will be dedicating an exhibition to Metzger. We will be also dedicating the archive of Ulrich Obrist in the interviews and works that will be seen for the first time in the French context, or newer works that have been made in dedication to Metzger, opening the exhibition at the end of June. Metzger, for those that you're not familiar with his work, was a Polish Jewish artist who left for Britain during 1939. He was born in Germany in 1926. He studied in Cambridge and in Oxford, and he was heavily involved in anti-capitalist and anti-consumerist movements and the campaign for nuclear disarmament. From the 1960s onwards, he participated in many committees and was pioneer in non-violent civil disobedience movements. His activism provided the foundation for his first artist manifesto, for a manifesto that called for auto-destructive art, which he described as a desperate, last-minute subversive political weapon and an attack to a capitalist system of art dealers and collectors who manipulate modern art for profits. His work has been exhibited in many places, in MAMAC in Nice, in Tate Britain, at the Hommage Museum in Mexico City. And in this part of the panel, we will invite Hélène Guenin, who was the curator and she's the director of the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Nice. Hélène curated the exhibition Gustav Metzger Remember Nature in 2017. It was the last exhibition during while he was still alive. Actually, Metzger passed away during the exhibition. In the panel, we will have Ulrich Obrist, who's the director, the artistic director of the Serpentine Galleries and a senior advisor to the LUMA Arles project. Ulrich and Gustav Metzger were in close relationship for many years, and their conversations and their exchange has been influential for many of the projects of the Serpentine Galleries, but also of Ulrich's own thinking and the books that they were published together. We will also be joined by Leanne Dmyterko, who is the curator and co-director of the foundation of Gustav Metzger, and Benoît Piéron, who is an artist who has spent large part of his life, his childhood, and recently also, more recent days, in hospitals because of the current issues of disease that he's facing. And this is also what will be the beginning of the conversation. We will start by discussing the notion of illness, recuperation, disease, and destruction extensively, in conjunction to that, actually, through the work of Benoît. We will also discuss healing in the work of Metzger with Leanne, and with Hans Ulrich and with Hélène continuing, we will speak about Earth and the healing of Earth and the healing of nature, elements which were important for Metzger and will be seen also in the exhibition we're preparing here. So please join me in welcoming the panel. While we're starting, I just wanted to say that Benoît will present one of his sculptures, which includes a light component. In case we have someone who might be affected by light and maybe potentially epileptic consequences, we just want to advise you that the light sculpture will contain flashlights. In case you have any problems with this, please let us know.
Je le répète en français juste pour que ce soit très clair. Il va y avoir des composants lumineux avec des flashs lors de cette sculpture. Donc s'il y a des personnes qui ont des problèmes d'épilepsie, merci d'en être conscient.
Benoît, you want to install the light?
Yes, I think I will install the lamp. So if you have some sunglasses, maybe you can put it. It's only for the feng shui of the talk. I am really happy to take part of it.
Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. Just to explain what we are seeing, this is an emergency light, which is more for police or I don't know what. And what you see up to the light is a silk square made with my previous cancer. It's a carcinoma clear cell that I discover at the same time that I discover the work of Gustav Metzger and also Derek Jarman. It's a kind of, I was bedridden after this cancer, after surgery, and there is Gustav and Derek in my bed. So I discover them, and I try to remember exactly how it works, but it was more like a tramadol moment, where more liquid, more blue, and more things like that. So what is important for me in the work of Metzger is, on what I can relate with my experience, is the impermanence of the body. A healed body is a kind of internal war where you never could defeat, or it's only the process which is important. And I figure in the work that some creation could happen, that some happy thing could happen inside of this destruction. Also because in the medical area, there is this silk square is actually came from the imagery, the medical imagery, and it's a modelization in 3 dimensions that is used by the surgeon before the surgery, before the surgical theater scene, and it's a kind of game where you repeat gesture or this kind of thing. So there is this war also component who came from medical order, I think. And I can relate to that. And the other thing, well, this is the first thing. This power, and for me, this kind of I hate the term of healing a little bit because it's totally binary. It's for valid people who are not, but yes, healing is not available for so many people. So maybe you can not be in between, you can just forget healing, and at this time when you forget healing or espoir, I don't know how you say in English, hope, yes, in the waiting room, which is the land of the pajamas people, which is healed people. when hope disappears, something could happen. And I think this is what I see in crystal quartz. Yes, this is what impressed me. And this is also part of my encounter with Hans, because I was working on a piece which was shown in Lafayette Anticipation past days, and which was washing a laundrette. And there is also this kind of light, but they are put, yes, that's it. So you can see, and it's not a projection. Inside of each washing machine, there is this kind of light. And also there is a 3 disco ball, and there is a random code with a kind of presence of the inness and of the impermanence. Everything could have happened. So it's for me, it's a shape of illness, but of impermanence, and that I can relate in Gustav Metzger part of the work. And also because this is video, so you can see there is this kind of precipitate, and I've got the same fascination that I see because there is this. I won't speak too much about Gustav Metzger because, of course, I am just an artist and I don't have expertise and never be precise about that. But when I read Journey or Thing of Metzger, I see that there is this very important exhibition where he is in a laboratory, and I feel the same curiosity to know what happened inside of the body or inside of the society. And but yes, I think it's like childish, childish animism with this kind of precipitate, but also with science, because it was very it was very precise, this piece, and there is so many code and people who works on it. Yes, so I am very it's very important for me to show to there and to be connected with Gustav, which I take some time in my bed with Derek also.
You said that during the time of you said that during the time of the waiting room, particularly, that this idea of hope was also related to the work of Metzger, or to your thinking about Metzger as well.
With hope.
Hope, espoir.
Yeah. Yes, I think for me it's important that hope could disappear, and when you are not in this kind of binarity, you can start to think about the process, and you could be happy with that, with the sense of, and destruction could be a kind of medium, but without the bad metaphor, the second pen, like when you are healed, there is a second thing which is bad, which is a metaphor, the illness, like Sontag quote.
Leanne, if I may ask you, you worked closely with Gustav for many years. You also are very familiar with the liquid crystal environments that Benoît referenced. What is your thought on the idea of hope and healing and hope, but also on the liquid formations and the environments particularly?
Well, I do.
Yeah, it starts. Yeah. It's on.
I'm not sure exactly if I should start.
No.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. So I won't start exactly on that point, but I will come to it because that's where I'll end up in a second or two. But I wanted to start by speaking a little bit about Gustav Metzger's work and the process, because he was very focused on process, not necessarily the end result. So many of his works were actually performative in a sense, participatory in a sense, but the end result was not necessarily what he placed value on. He had a very strong connection with nature and and healing the world was part of it. And through these processes in his work, he was very interested in and hoping to highlight transformation and the process of transformation. I have some images here of some works. So this is a work called Mobile, which has been reactivated in many locations around the world. This is in front of Hommage Museum in Mexico City in 2014. So this is a process whereby a plant in a transparent box is basically left to die as a car drives around the city and circulates. Over time, you see the process of the death, the decay of this plant. And you know, for some people it's a bit disturbing, and they think, well, actually you're killing nature, not the opposite. But he felt that our world is quite brutal, and what people do every single day, whether it's drive cars or tear down forests, you know, clear land for agriculture, it is brutal, and that's the reality, and you need to see that and feel it as being horrific in order to transform. And so he was interested about the transformation, not only of the materials, but also of the people viewing the process, and then thereby society. So there's a couple of more images there of Mobile, just kind of close-ups. There's one more as well. Yeah. And then the next project that I just wanted to mention is called Flailing Trees. So one more picture up. So this is a work he was commissioned to do by the Manchester International Festival in 2009, and this is a permanent installation of 21 trees. So again, he's trying to show the brutality of human actions on nature. So 21 trees are taken out of the earth, they're uprooted, and you see the roots kind of splayed upwards to the sky, and they're planted in concrete. So obviously they're dead trees, they're not going to grow, but they're there, and it's a kind of brutal reminder of what people do every day. Over time, these trees degrade. I think this picture, I took this in about 2019, maybe 10 years after its planting, I guess you could say. And over time, you know, they continue to degrade. They're there. This is an indoor installation that is actually owned by a permanent collection in Rochechouart here in France. So that can actually be seen as well. And again, it's all about the kind of process, and it's him playing with the materials, but also incorporating nature and reminding people we have to transform so that this sort of brutality doesn't take place, you know, on a massive scale. Basically, it already is, but he's trying to draw our attention to it even further. The next slide. Let's see, the next slide. I've just put a quote that Gustav, I guess I should read it here as well so it can be translated into French, but let's see if I can see it. We must act against the destroyers of life with all the power and ruthlessness at the command of life. We cannot evade what is happening. We have to hit back. We have to introduce laws. We have to have ongoing conferences. The whole world has to come together and minimize, if not abandon, the destruction. So he was very outspoken on destruction. Obviously, he started you know, many years before the conversation started about climate change. You know, in his work, you know, it was kind of embedded in even the drawings he did in the 1940s and 50s. It was kind of always there, and it really preempted, I think, the conversations that started to come up later in the 70s, 80s, 90s. He wasn't talking about extinction of species necessarily. He was talking about extinction of everything, of humankind. The next slide here shows one of his, let's see. Yes, so this is drawing attention to some of the projects he was working on near to the end of his life. So he was really interested in bringing people together. So he felt that the best way to fight extinction, to fight the destruction and bring people's awareness to it was really by bringing together people from different disciplines. So it wasn't just about, you know, him as an artist. It was about him as a facilitator, as an activist, as a person who could use discussions as well as artwork to highlight these issues, but also to bring together people in, you know, with scientific backgrounds, philosophers, writers, historians, everyone, because he felt everybody had to contribute. It wasn't something that anyone could do on their own. So he was traveling around to art schools around the UK. He was trying to call on people to take action. He, for example, this conference, the Facing Extinction Conference, he actually hoped would be a sort of series of conferences that would be ongoing. This was the first iteration of it. On the next slide. So here is the liquid crystal environment, and this will be actually seen later next month here at LUMA. I wanted to look back at this because actually he started experimenting with the liquid crystals in the 1960s, and he at first saw enormous potential in them, not just as something he could use to make artworks, but because he was so interested in the transformation, the process, he felt that people needed to have a space to retreat into to transform themselves. So he created these environments, which were dark rooms, which had massive projections on the walls. This is a 7-screen, a larger version that he created initially for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Lyon in 2014. And you would go into a space, you would leave behind all of the worries, the issues of the outside world, and you yourself as a human being could be transformed by kind of absorbing the beauty of the light and the crystals and the colors and the transformation taking place there. You yourself could leave transformed by spending time in this space that was meant to kind of heal you from the worries of society. So hopefully you can come and do that next month. I wanted to end on this video of Gustav himself calling for a worldwide day of action that he did in 2015. Next year is the 10th anniversary of his Remember Nature campaign, which we're reactivating worldwide. So so you can hear from Gustav himself.
I, Gustav Metzger, am asking for your participation in this worldwide call for a day of action to remember nature on November 4th, 2015. We appeal to arts professionals from all disciplines to take a stand against the ongoing erasure of species. It is our privilege and our duty to be at the forefront of the struggle. There is no choice but to follow the path of ethics into aesthetics. We live in societies suffocating in waste. Our task is to remind people of the richness and complexity in nature, to protect nature as far as we can. And by doing so, art will enter territories that are inherently creative. We invite you to respond creatively to this call and encourage others to participate also. The aim is to create a mass movement across the arts to ward off extinction. Thank you.
Oh, that's incredibly moving. Wonderful. If I may ask you, Hans-Ulrich, what was your relationship and the exchanges that you had with Metzger on Earth, on nature, on biodiversity, on extinction as well?
Yeah, the dialogue, and it's indeed so moving, Leanne, that you show this video here. The dialogue with Gustav began really at the beginning, very beginning of the 90s, when, as a student, I started to meet artists of my own generation. I remember a conversation with Douglas Gordon where Douglas said, we should find Gustav Metzger, and how inspired he was by Gustav and by Rauschenberg, because they brought time into art. And I think that this idea of time, and it's fascinating that every generation, it's also why it was so fascinating to listen to you, Benoît, before, that every generation seems to find, different aspects, different things in Gustav, which is often the case with great artists. No, it travels through time, and different generations can revisit it. And in the early 90s, it had a lot to do with time, this idea of time, also long duration. I think the idea that Gustav early on believed in this idea of the artwork being a living organism. Now, many of these works, we see the liquid crystals, are a living organism, and today it's something which is so present. I mean, it's interesting in relation to when Martin mentioned initially the topic, this connected to garden. It is interesting how at this moment in time, so many younger artists are actually rather about making gardens than exhibitions. So we see that a lot at the Serpentine when we invite artists, they actually want to do gardens. Recently, Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg, she wanted to do a garden with AI for pollinators, in Kensington Gardens. And that's something which Gustav really anticipated. For him, it was about time, it was about living organism, and all of that. And it took us a long time to meet them because one couldn't really reach Gustav, because Gustav didn't have a telephone, and the only way was that he would reach you, and he would call you from a telephone cabin, usually from the subway. But by the time one would get the message, he would already have, moved on, and somebody else would answer the telephone cabin in the subway. So it took us about 5 years to actually meet. And it was only when I actually worked for the first time at the Serpentine. It was before I joined the Serpentine. I was a guest curator in '96, and we did a show called Take Me, I'm Yours. And one day, the lobby desk said, there is an artist downstairs who said that he did a similar thing in the 70s, which is on now down in Gallery House, an exhibition where you could do everything you usually can't do in a museum, where you could interact, because I think the other aspect is, of course, participation. He's an artist who involved in a radical way participation in his work. And so I went downstairs and we went for tea. I mean, he didn't have a tea because he would always only have boiling water. He explained to me that that's really important. So ever since I took on that habit, to drink boiling water. And Gustav would explain to me about the practice, and the dialogue began, which then was very patchy because I went, back to Paris, where I was based at the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris at the time. And again, for months, we couldn't reach each other. But we invited him to do a show in actually '96 at the Musée d'Art Moderne with the historic photographs. But the dialogue really became only continuous when I then moved in 2006 permanently to London. I became the artistic director of the Serpentine with Julia Peyton-Johnson. Invited me, and we from the beginning, saw Gustav regularly because he would come to our office once I was there, very regularly, almost every week, and we would have these conversations. And what was so fascinating is that we started to talk about ecology, and as Leanne pointed out, I mean, this topic of ecology, environmentalism, extinction was at the core of his practice, and he wanted to do an exhibition about that. We felt it's important, for the first time in London to do a retrospective of Gustav's practice, where many of these pieces which Leanne showed, were seen, happened in 2009. And the day after the opening, literally at 10 o'clock in the morning, Gustav was in my office and says, that's only the beginning, because you cannot think that now this topic of ecology, is sorted. It's going to be there for the next 50, 100 years, and we need to bring that into the center of the institution. And I think that's what is so fascinating, is that the dialogue with an artist can actually, if we allow that to happen, in a way transform the institution, because we then worked with him on the Extinction Marathon, which was basically a worldwide gathering of practitioners on different continents about the topic of extinction. He really wanted to use the kind of language as extinction, because he felt that otherwise it wouldn't be a wake-up call. And again, when this marathon happened the next morning, he was in our office and he said, what's next? What are we going to do next? And that's really when we then realized that we needed to create a department, that it couldn't just be projects. And we, with Lucia Pietrojusti, hired basically a curator for ecology and created the General Ecology Project, something which now more institutions also start to do. That means that also ecology becomes part of, in a way, everything the institution does. And that, of course, brings us then to LUMA, because it is so special that we can discuss today Gustav Metzger at LUMA Arles, and that we also can then actually realize this exhibition with Arthur Furre, in late June, which is going to be here for almost a year, because in a way ecology is so deeply rooted in the DNA of LUMA. Because I always remember when Maya invited us at the very beginning, 12, 13, 14 years ago, for a think tank in Zurich with the artists Philippe Pareno and Liam Gillick, and with the curators Beatrix Roof and Tom Eccles. In that very first meeting, Maya said that ecology has to be, as Gustav said, in the DNA of the building. And there is an incredible connection, which is maybe important to mention here, which is that one of Gustav's really big inspiration for long duration thinking, for art, producing reality, was very much actually Maya's father, Luc Hofmann, who is the co-founder of the World Wildlife Fund, and he's exactly the same generation as Gustav. He's born in Basel in 1923. So the late Luc Hofmann not only co-founded the World Wildlife Fund, but also, after studying zoology, became a big expert of ornithology, and then, of course, realized in the Camargue these marshlands, of thousands of kilometers needed to be saved. And for Gustav, this idea that was actually possible was an incredible inspiration. It gave him courage that, in a way, also through his art practice, he could change the world. And there was always this dream of Gustav to actually meet Luc Hofmann, and they never were in the same place, they never met. So in a way, by bringing the exhibition here, this unrealized project is a little bit going to happen, maybe.
It's a meeting place. And Hélène, in relation to the exhibition that you hosted in Nice in 2017, how did the institution respond, change, alter its processes through the work of Metzger, through the works that were shown? How did the audience respond? How did you perceive the transformations that were happening?
Two things. Maybe first, it was the second collaboration with Gustav Metzger. We had a collaboration within a group show with a mobile experience that Leanne Dmyterko showed before. And when we had this project of survey show focused on the ecological issues and his commitment since 5 decades on those issues, I really tried to enter in the methodology of Gustav Metzger, to be as close as possible of his way of working. And at that time, I did not know about the conversation that you had about the praxis and whatever, but it was almost obvious that working with him, you had to adapt and adopt a kind of ethic in the way of producing a show. So there was almost no shipping. Most of the works were reenacted locally with mainly students or young artists. There were some calls for participation, and it was a big show. It was 1,200 meters square, so with not so many objects, but really going through the main issues that Gustav Metzger raised through the decades. So it means that when the show began, it was a beginning, of course, but it was also after 1 year of process of preparation and involvement of public groups within the city, and especially students, that were really brought in the process, and with different lectures to introduce his work, and also works with groups and people working on laws for nature and whatever from the University of Nice. So it was a lot of people coming together to make this show happen. And then for the 4 months of the show, we really also had different moments to also share the methodologies of Gustav Metzger. And it was very impressive to see the reaction of the audience, because the city is quite conservative, let's say, and I was not that sure that the way he was raising those issues in a very radical manner would touch the public. But in fact, it really resonated also within the ecological context of our region, with a very beautiful and fragile ecosystem, and people were really interested also to understand that from the 60s, he raised issues such as the pollution of the atmosphere, Mobile is about that, is about the suffocation of the living and of the plants. And we can see here one of the spaces with the result of Mobile after several days of tour in the city. And so he was one of the rare artists in the early 70s to raise those issues. And what was very strong also, and a lesson from me about Gustav Metzger, is that from the beginning he was speaking about the fascination of Western countries and Western culture for self-destruction and mass destruction, but he always raised those topics to struggle for the forces of life. And that's very important. And when he was 18, I think, he was living in a community, and that was really living with a lot of values about life and organic and taking care of Earth, and it was a very important experience for him, and he had an experience of gardener, and he wrote years or decades after that for him it was the beginning of a chain of life that continued all his life long.
I have a question which I want to ask to all four of you. Start with you, Benoît, as we spoke about the illness, the destruction, the emergencies. And my question is about surviving. What can be done for surviving? How does surviving work in this kind of current states, modes of emergencies that we're facing everywhere? Personal, existential, climactic, natural.
Yes, I think I could speak only from my body and from my experience. So my way to do it is to make some patchwork with repurposed sheets from the hospital. There is a previous users who make some stain, and it's a kind of collective body. And this is something that I could connect also this idea of a collective body, but also when you are in this position to be on the waiting room, you are out of the productive time or the reproductive time, and you can use it. There is a movement, political movement that inspired me, and I just wanted to mention it. It's the Socialist Patient Collective, who say that turn illness into weapon, and I think it's a way also to answer to this condition, to use this. Okay, so you are ill. Society wants you to go to the hospital in order to be repaired, like in a garage. But maybe sometimes it's not available. So you don't have hope, but you don't have the necessity to be productive or to be reproductive, all this kind of thing. So everything is possible. It's a kind of liberty. I don't know if it could relate to Gustav Metzger also, but...
Leanne, from your perspective and from your knowledge and working with Gustav for a long time, what would he be proposing as a way for surviving?
Well, I think, in fact, what I was talking about, the liquid crystal environment, he felt that because humans are the people that are going to have to enact change, they're going to have to transform society and the way things operate and challenge, the powers. He felt that, having something like liquid crystals would be a kind of healing environment so that we could have the energy and kind of regain the power to be able to do so, and to also just seek inside of ourselves and think about what can I do. So he, speaking about hope, I remember in the early days when I met him, thinking he must be so pessimistic. He deals with all these issues that are, overwhelming and big, and how could he think that it's going to change, and can it change? And he would say, actually, I'm very hopeful. if I have anything, I have hope. I'm not actually discouraged. Yes, it's a big picture that I'm looking at, but in his mind, as an artist, that was his way of kind of contributing to some sort of change. But he also said, art is the change. So art will be there to inspire people, to influence people, to provoke, and to transform society. So he was very optimistic. But I think he just felt that we needed these spaces to kind of regenerate and rejuvenate. And, part of it was about, getting yourself out into nature as well. So I think the liquid crystal environments were maybe more for an urban setting in some ways, but he had an unrealized project, which was proposed in 2014 on the occasion of his Mexico City exhibition. And it was basically about creating domes all over the country, kind of geodesic domes. Inside would be smaller versions of the liquid crystal environment. And in order to enter, you couldn't pay. It wasn't an exhibition. But these were spaces where you could enter once you had taken action, once you had done something that was literal and obvious. So you could plant a tree, you could clean rubbish from the beaches. Then you were able to enter this regenerative space where you could kind of go and regain power and kind of continue your struggle. So he was very hopeful, I think, and that we would survive.
Hans Ulrich, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's very deeply connected. I mean, if we look, I was like yesterday looking at the timeline a bit, of his biography, and born, and that has so much to do with survival, and then, as Leanne also says, and then in a way finding hope, through art. Because Gustav was born in 1926 in Nuremberg in Germany to an Orthodox Jewish Polish family. And in 1939, after witnessing his father's arrest by Nazi soldiers, he travels to the UK as a Polish citizen with his elder brother Max Mendel under the auspices of the refugee children movement. As he always said, it was basically with a Kindertransport that he came, from Germany to the UK. And then, he basically already in 1944, when he relocated actually to Bristol, started to initially connect to farms. He decided to pursue a career as a sculptor rather than as a full-time revolutionary. Because when he was actually a teenager, he wanted to be a full-time revolutionary. But in 1944, he decided to pursue a career as a sculptor. And then in tandem, which brings us to the topic here of the Conference of the Gardens, he began working as a gardener at Champneys Nature Clinic, actually near Tring in Hertfordshire, where he took very early in 1944, before many people talked about that, a very strong interest in organic food. He already in 1944 became a vegetarian and started there actually to make his first sculpture. What is also interesting is that he then, on several occasions, also had doubt if art would be the right way. I mean, Leanne could tell us much more about that. He actually went on an art strike on several occasions. He stopped making art for years. But it is fascinating that towards the end of his life, he very strongly, in a way, came back to art.
You want to say something, Leanne, about this doubt, the stop or the pause?
Maybe, do you want to say anything actually about this topic first before I jump in?
About what the surviving aspect that you have encountered, what has been relevant through the work that you have done with Gustav.
I think there is something striking for me. It's notion of empowerment, and I think that for Gustav Metzger it's very important. And first time we had this collaboration, it was about a show that I was preparing at a moment when the notion of Anthropocene was starting to be more popular. And I was astonished by, this overwhelming concept and stuck, what can we do? And at this moment came back to my mind the work of Gustav Metzger. And he was one who never stopped this notion of empowerment, claiming, struggling, calling for attention, saying, of course, it's the result of extractivism, capitalism, industry, whatever, but it's also every single person's responsibility. And for me, it's not a question of survival, but it's also a way of being active and to refuse to just be a spectator of what's happening.
Not giving up in a way.
Yeah, I think that really resonates with him and his work. I remember him telling me as well, I didn't really have a choice. I felt I had an obligation. I had to do this. Even if I didn't want to sometimes, I just had to. It was my responsibility. So he was very much about taking responsibility and actually doing something, acting. So that's what all of his work was about.
You spoke, Hélène, about empowerment. I want to ask you, like, this notion of empowerment in his work. How does it resonate with you? Hans Ulrich, for example, or Benoît, or Leanne. What was the empowerment that you potentially see in what Gustav has offered through his practice? Benoît?
I'm not sure. I've got an answer to that.
Hans Ulrich?
I mean, we once had a conversation about that, and he very much talked about this idea that he wanted, he really wanted the work to be participatory, and he wanted this to be a collaborative process. No? And if you think about, I mean, we spoke today earlier on the phone to George Olsen, who was his very close friend with whom he did the Remember Nature project. And that was basically the last project we all were working on with him. And it was really about doing things together. It was about togetherness. And he wanted to basically create a movement where all the school children, everybody, in the UK and then later on all over the world would participate in this action. So I think it had more to do with that. It had a lot to do with this idea of a collective. And we actually have a few, if you could see the images, we have a few of these post-it notes which he wrote for my Instagram, and some of them have actually to do with your question. One is about togetherness.
Maybe we can pull them up on the screen.
If we could have I think there are 7 images. Yeah, that's the portrait I made of Gustav, and then exactly here. All of us together was his answer about this question of the power of art. And then, little by little, the handwriting, almost like with Robert Walser, became indecipherable.
We need to become intentions or die.
Yeah. And idealists. We have to become idealists. And then it became very difficult to be deciphered because he called this the extinction handwriting. He basically developed a new type of handwriting. And whenever we met, he would do that for my Instagram account. It became more and more abstract, but it's a form of writing. Drawing and writing come together. And then we should have a photo. Yeah, here again, that's an extinction handwriting. And there should be one photo of a sculpture, which is the very last work he realized. This one, yes. So the very last time I saw him was a week before he passed away, and he was very unwell, but we had a conversation, and he really, and that's something, Leanne, you said you experienced even later than my meeting, because I think there was even a day before he passed away, he said that it was really about continuing the struggle to fight extinction. And he was talking until the very last moment about that. But whilst we had this conversation, he made this very last sculpture. He basically would take a piece of paper and would, hold it in his hand and slowly, during about 20 minutes, shape this sculpture, which will also be, for the first time, actually shown here in the exhibition. End of June.
Wonderful. I want to ask if there's any questions. Maybe we can take some questions from the floor. I cannot see, but
Hi, I have a quick question that Vasilis kind of touched upon in the beginning to Leanne. you mentioned the auto-destructive art and the mobile, and we've seen some iconic kind of works by Gustav Metzger. And I was wondering, how do you manage, in terms of like the legacy, since that's kind of part of what you do, how do you manage the tension maybe between the very nature of his art, which was kind of all about escape almost and evasion, with the patrimonialization of it and the necessity also to kind of keep his heritage? Thank you so much.
That's an interesting question. Before Gustav passed away, many years before, he knew that he wanted his kind of message to continue. He knew that he wanted his work to go on, and so he himself defined what he wanted from his work and his estate after his death. So he created the Gustav Metzger Foundation then, and he set quite a long list of kind of principles on which it was based. And I mean, these are very big things, like the foundation must fight extinction on a global scale, for example. He didn't define how we should do it, but he defined that we have to continue that fight and that struggle and that challenge. So at the moment, the foundation is myself and my colleague. We're both based in the UK, but what we try to do as much as possible is think as though the artist is still there and answering questions and doing his work. So we both worked really closely with him for about a decade before he died, and so we have a very good knowledge base of kind of all of his works, everything he did, and so we just try to repeat that as much as we can. I mean, for him, it was always about making sure people hear loud and clear, and trying to still inspire people to take up that fight and take up that challenge, as well as creating these regenerative spaces like the liquid crystal environment. So that's how we're doing that. I hope. It's a challenge, obviously, to do it without him there, but I think with the knowledge we have, we're just trying to continue as much as we can. And you're right about the fact, for example, autodestructive art. So if you think of the acid nylon paintings, they were never meant to exist as an artwork. They were kind of a performative process, a process that was about viewing the transformation of the materials on the one hand, but also the transformation of the individual and society. But even those, because we worked very closely with him before he died, we feel confident now that we can actually almost kind of recreate and still show people that and still kind of keep that message quite strong, I hope. Anyway.
Any more questions? You have maybe one question, if there are any. Well, if not, then I would like to thank our guests. Thank you very much. Benoît, Ulrich, Leanne, Hélène, thank you very much for being here. And we look forward to the exhibition in opening on June the 29th. So thank you again.